All right. Part 7? I don't know. Anyway, I was just mentioning in 2009, 800 Americans were interviewed. Um, the national news organizations, very or somewhat biased, 83.6%. It's an amazing number. Versus somewhat unbiased or not at all biased, 14.1%. That's like night and day. National news organizations um, played a very or somewhat strong role in election of Obama. 89.3% said yes, versus little or no role in election of Obama, 10%. National news is intent on promoting Obama presidency, 69%. Disagree, 26.5%. National news is promoting Obamacare without objective criticism, 56.4% yes. News media have their own political and public policy positions and attempt to influence public opinion, 86.6% yes. Back in 2003, it was only 70%. This is only 6 years later. Selection of news outlets based on objective reporting versus just reflecting their own point of view. 59% yes, 19% the opposite. Believe me, or believe all or most media reporting. 24.3% said they believe all or most media reporting in 2009 survey. Old style, traditional, objective, and fair journalism is dead. 67.9% of these Americans say yes. Journalism is dead, folks. 2012, 1,000 voters regarding the presidential campaign were interviewed. Obama received the best treatment from media so far. 59% said yes. Romney received it, only 18%. Media will continue to help Obama. 57% agreed with that. Media will have positive coverage for Romney. Only 9% agreed with that. 2013 poll. Rasmussen, 1,000 voters. The average media reporter is more liberal than they are. More liberal than they are. 41%. The average media reporter is more conservative than they are. 18%. Pew had 1,480 adults interviewed. News organizations are best described as liberal, 46%. News organizations are best described as conservative, 26%. Gallup, 1,510 adults were asked. Media are too liberal, 46% said yes. Too conservative, 13%. Perception of media liberal bias is strong. Republicans say 74%. Conservatives say 73%. It is strong liberal bias. Bias is just about right. Democrats 57%. Clueless. Absolutely clueless. Now here's a list of the people, the personalities in the media who have denied liberal bias in the media, and some of them more than once. At the New York Times, and you won't know all these names. Some of these are editors, some of these are columnists, some of these are owners, whatever. But these are people who just basically deny liberal bias, and they do it over and over again. At the New York Times, Bill Keller, Howell Raines, Bob Herbert, Andrew Rosenthal, Jill Abramson, Richard Stevenson. NBC, Brian Williams, Katie Couric, Tom Brokaw. CBS, Dan Rather, Leslie Stahl, Mike Wallace. PBS, Jim Lehrer, Bill Moyers. NPR, Brooke Gladstone. MSNBC, Rachel Maddow, Chris Matthews, David Schuster, Keith Olbermann. At ABC, Barbara Walters, Christiane Amanpour, Peter Jennings, the late. CNN, Rick Kaplan, Deborah Potter. Politico, John Harris, Jim Vandehey. UPI, Helen Thomas, the late. LA Times, Ron Brownstein. Jack Nelson at Time Magazine, Margaret Carlson. That's just a small list of those who have been known to outwardly speak to the public in a microphone or in a camera that there's no liberal bias. These journalists, however, have admitted liberal bias. At MSNBC, Mark Halperin and Joe Scarborough. This, of course, is the old Joe Scarborough before he became engaged to Dr. Mika, and now he's, of course, not even a Republican anymore. Political, Jim Vandehey. He's had it both ways. And John Harris. He's had it both ways. New York Magazine, John Hellman. NPR, Juan Williams. By the way, he's had it both ways. New York Times, Bill Keller, Steve Roberts. Daniel Ockrent. NBC, Lee Cowan. Washington Post, Thomas Edsel. Deborah Howell, Marie Arana. Seattle Times, David Boardman. ABC, Britt Hume, Carol Simpson, Terry Moran, John Stossel, Peter Jennings. Of course, Britt Hume is now with Fox. This is back when he was still with ABC. Wall Street Journal, John Harwood. CBS, Walter Cronkite, the late, admitted to liberal bias. Van Gordon Sauter, Andy Rooney, Bernard Goldberg, who of course is one of my favorite writers about liberal bias itself. At Newsweek, Evan Thomas, Jacob Weisberg, New Republic magazine, Jonathan Chait, Hendrik Hertzberg at CNN, Jack Cafferty, Barbara Pyle at Time magazine, Margaret Collerson, she's had it both ways, William Henry III, Charles Alexander, the Boston Globe, Diane Dumanovsky. So you'll find just as many people admitting it as not admitting it, and depending on the question, the time, or what the issue might be about, they might say one day there's liberal bias, and the next day that there's not liberal bias. They're all over the planet with this one, and they don't really know what they're saying from day to day. Okay, so let's try to wrap this thing up a little bit. I just spent 2.5 or 3 parts to this, laying out year after year, poll after poll, proof positive that not only are the media themselves admitting their bias to some degree in terms of how they vote and whatnot, and what they think of issues, but how the public perceives them, and the disparity between what they think and the public thinks, and how they vote versus how the public votes. It is illustrative of a very left-wing media bias. So now we're going to talk about how the media becomes biased in the first place. How do they get here? Is it possible that everybody who ever strove to become a journalist is a left-winger, and a hard left-winger from the minute they're born to the time they actually gain that type of a job in the industry? It's hard to believe they all are. Many of them might be wide-eyed and open-minded when they start, but somehow they get corrupted. Let's find out why. It all starts with a little phrase that I've... one of the ones that I really make my red flags go up, the hackles on my neck and the hairs on my arm go up. And that is when I hear somebody say, I want to change the world. The do-gooder's motto. Well, as we all know, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And these people who think they have the ability by themselves somehow to change the world, many of them go into journalism and broadcasting. We know this because they had many interviews with students like at Columbia School of Journalism saying, why did you get into it? I want to change the world. Oh my God. Is that the job of a journalist? To change the world? Not according to the definition of journalism. Nope. They think of journalism as something they can use for social change. They become social justice warriors with a pen a typewriter, a computer, a microphone, a camera. They think they're social justice heroes when they speak in terms of liberal, with the liberal agenda to the masses. So what draws people to journalism? Well, here's what I believe does it. The things that draw people to journalism are as follows: access, privilege, prestige, fame, influence, and high salaries. Not very altruistic reasons. Sounds like power and influence and money. Sounds like the Clintons. I'm surprised the Clintons didn't become journalists. What they actually have become are, as Stalin once coined the phrase, useful idiots. Which is to say that for the purposes of the people on the left, especially in politics, they have used the people on the left in journalism as their puppets, doing their bidding, mimicking and parroting their phrases, and of course they all are on the same page and agree with the same thing, so it's not like they're doing it by twisting their arm. They're all they are in agreement. They're just helping each other like a symbiotic parasite. But the powerful in this country use journalists to their own ends. They use them as useful idiots for their own purposes. And to point this out, let me rattle off a few ideas here. Freedom of expression, legally protected and practiced universally, is a threat to the accumulation of power. People in power do not like freedom of expression universally practiced. Power mongers must break down free expression to control the language. There's another name for that. It's called political correctness. By controlling the language, you stifle free expression, which helps the powerful. To combat a well-informed public, community organizers, hello Saul Alinsky, hello Barack Hussein Obama, are dispatched to push policies that cultivate ignorance and vulnerability, which produce a culture of confusion, dependence, fear, and resentment. Once powermongers control all outlets of communication, mainly the media, Hollywood, and academia, their propaganda can do its work. Propaganda conditions people through political correctness to see things their way, which serves to promote the elite's power in perpetuity. If journalists aid in their propaganda, they help facilitate this practice. So when the journalists help the powerful with their own propaganda, this facilitates the practice of promoting their power forever. What turns otherwise honest journalists into a perversion of a journalist, a perverted version of one? Well, if they don't tote the agenda, they don't get moved up the chain or get a piece of the power pie. So remember, you might have a wide-eyed, honest journalist with integrity and all that. And they might want to go into journalism with the idea that they're going to adhere to the traditional standards and morals of the industry. But then they find out that they don't get the juicy jobs. They don't get the juicy assignments. and they don't get a piece of that power pie. And so cronyism occurs. The more a certain group of journalists are willing to play ball. Pride, greed, and hubris lead them down the dark path of journalism. Objectivity won't survive the ordeals of political correctness and other filters, which drives independent thought out of journalists. Combine this lapdog media with the powerful elites who hate the freedom of information, as we previously mentioned, and what you get is propaganda from willing participants, not hard, factual, and accurate news. You just get propaganda. Turns propaganda into a certainty, and it's never to be questioned. Today, 24/7 mainstream media and social media cherry-picked and rehashes their narratives from these journalists over and over again. Without real journalism and a free flow of real information, people lose the ability to exercise real thought, aka they become sheeple. Without the grounding of information through objective morality, there is no morality. Let me say it again. Without the grounding of information through objective morality, there is no morality. Is conservative talk radio and editorialists like Hannity, for instance, biased? Yeah, of course they are. The difference is they say they are. They're telling the audience to proceed accordingly. Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, all these people, Mark Levin, they say, yeah, I'm biased. So proceed with caution. Proceed accordingly. Take what I say and go out and disprove me if you want. But I'm not lying to you saying this is news or this is truth or this is whatever. This is my opinion. Take it for what it is. And if you find that I'm mostly accurate, come back and listen to me again. If you find I'm full of it, don't listen to me anymore. They're willing to put themselves out on that limb and stand by what they believe in. The mainstream media will never admit their bias. They can't afford to. Although, I will say lately it's been going the other way. They have been admitting it and basically laughing in our face. But they laughingly think that they're not only with unbiased, but that they're also mainstream in their opinions, as evidenced by the statistics I just rattled off. They actually think they're mainstream. Conservative Talk Radio is sponsored by advertisers. The left wing's response to this? To right-wing radio? Well, they had Air America, or Airhead America, as I used to call it, which either goes bankrupt all the time or has no audience at all, and is supplemented by donations from Democrats and liberals. Or they have NPR, which requires public funding. Well, what's my opinion about that? You've heard it before. If something like NPR is so great, so important, so necessary, so fair and balanced, it should be able to survive on its own. Not needing public money, taxpayer money. If it's so great, it should be able to stand on its own like talk radio, conservative talk radio, which has sponsors. Instead, it pushes groupthink and topics that are treated as normal, but are squarely founded on the agendas of the left. Or found on the agendas of the left. So let's finish this up. What we've shown you in this series of videos here is that not only did the left have a watershed moment in journalism, where they went from being fair and honest and holding to standards to where now they don't even have any standards. We've also shown historically that the left and journalism, left people on the left-wing journalism, has influenced history and has actually altered history and been complicit in that. Many occasions on many topics. We've also shown statistically for the last many decades how left-wing the media has gotten, even to their own admission, and the public is not fooled by any of it. And we've shown how easy it is for a young journalist, or not so young, whatever, to get corrupted by the powers behind those in charge of the journalist outlets. They don't get the nice assignments. They want to get ahead at all. They have to play ball. And that will make someone change their mindset if it's not very strong anyway. And of course, the way they're taught in school, at Columbia and other places, and in high schools around the country, where more and more liberalism is shoved down their throats, it's quite easy to see how this could be quite easy for them to lose whatever little self-responsibility and integrity and honesty and honor that they might have had to begin with in favor of getting those juicy jobs and leaning left and reporting left and then being surrounded by only the left wing. There are people who have admitted that there are places in American journalism that if you do not toe the line, you're out. So you want a job, you want that prestige and that access and that privilege and those high salaries, you're going to play ball. And suddenly you're surrounded by nothing but left-wingers year after year after year, and you say to yourself, we must be the norm. We must be the mainstream. And they arrogantly claim that they have the mainstream opinions, and that anything else, anything that's moderate or right-wing, is extreme right. They're delusional. And because of all this, journalism is dead. Rest in peace, journalism. We'll see you on the next one.